Stop a man like that. Stop a man like that. You saw that resolution in Congress didn't get voted to limit his war powers. The UN Security Council hasn't done anything about it just yet to try and stop this. Who's to stop Donald Trump when he doesn't seem to care anything about attaining congressional approval or the United Nations approval for launching a war like this against a country that hasn't threatened anyone for many, many years, or waged war against any country for many, many years?
I mean, events, the former British Prime Minister, Macmillan, who said, events, dear boy, events. Things do change. Trump looks as if it is part of a plan, incidentally. Let's not focus only on Trump. Let's focus on Netanyahu, who is behind, we know, even Marco Rubio said it was actually Netanyahu who tilted the hand of Trump on going to war, attacking Iran. So it is a plan by Israel, certainly Netanyahu, but other people in Israel who want to destabilize the whole Middle East in order to control it. It is a plan. It has been reflected by Mike Huckabee, the lunatic U.S. ambassador in Jerusalem, who said that Israel should grab the whole of the Middle East, from the Nile to the Euphrates, the whole of Mesopotamia. It sounds lunatic, but it's actually part of a Zionist intention, which wants to expand Zionist rule across. They even wanted, I've read about people wanting to get back the oases owned by Jewish tribes in the days of Prophet Muhammad. They rebelled, conspired against the Prophet Muhammad, and they were expelled. And they want to be Zionists, they want to get them back. So there is no limit to their ambition, to their demonic plans. And but of course, I often like to quote the phrase "God of surprises." God, the Creator, may surprise us. It may well be that all these bad guys will will suffer it. And Trump himself doesn't look too good physically. He doesn't look too good. So who knows how long he's going to live?
We'll see. Nobody knows. None of us knows how long any of us is going to live. But on the tweet by Trump earlier, he said pretty much the same thing just before begging for a ceasefire in the previous round, the previous war, known as the 12-day war, last year. Was it in June or July? Just a few months ago. Do you think maybe we're looking at that happening, or do you have any fears that this might escalate even further and spread beyond, as it has, beyond the borders of Iran? But you're looking at energy prices going up, shipping in the Strait of Hormuz almost coming to a standstill. What do you think of it all?
Well, it is certainly spreading, but again, it's part of a plan. But you're quite right. I mean, the billionaires, the moguls, the magnates are not shopping at places like Tesco and supermarkets. But when the people like me who live on a pension have to go and buy groceries in supermarkets, and the prices will have gone up, and my gas bill will have gone up. Energy will gone up, electricity will gone up. So this is affecting ordinary people. And it's only because of this unjust, unprovoked, lunatic war. So it is spreading right now, but it is, it's not a speculation, it's a reality. And they need to create this profit from it. And when I say they profit from it, and when I say they, today, Trump, in my opinion, is a complete moron. He doesn't really have a vision, just to listen to his language. He changes from day to day. They say it's part of a strategy. No, it's part of a lunacy. The man has no intellect. He's just dominated by some obscure inner forces. They say is or ill-treated by his father. I don't know, but that's beside the point. I mean, the
And
fact is,
surrounded by you would say evil characters who are pulling his strings.
yes, and all his cabinet sycophants, the courtiers. They're not them. The only one who's got traces of independence is Marco Rubio. It may well be they will be kicked out very soon. But all the others are complete stooges. And nobody has got any integrity, any courage. So it looks
And it's not
bad.
just the cabinet. I mean, you remember the Secretary General of NATO, Rutte, also calling him daddy.
Well, that was a case really to make you cry. He's Rutte is a creep, and I mean, many people were ashamed. I remember even the Financial Times, which is hardly a progressive publication, was mocked Rutte for what he did. I mean, you think by crawling, by kissing the feet of the tyrant, I mean, behaving like a tyrant, you're actually going to get some benefit, but you're not. And the only guy who's got some kind of guts is the Spanish Prime Minister, who has said, no, we are not going to help you. You know, there's a Spanish word, cojones, which means some attributes of virility. I mean, Spanish Prime Minister's got cojones. All the others, the courtiers, do not have cojones like this, and they deserve to be despised.
On the global ramifications of this aggression, you talked about being a pensioner, going to the supermarket to buy groceries and having to pay more. Do they really care about us? Like, as just to quote the late Michael Jackson, they don't really care about us. I mean, do these leaders, so-called, care about their populations? You know, in Britain, in the United States, an overwhelming majority opposed to Gaza genocide, and all they got in the UK, for example, the suspension of 30 or 35 out of more than 300 arms licenses to the Israeli regime, the recognition of Palestine as a state, 2 years into the genocide, without demarcating where the borders would be, or if this would be a contiguous state for the Palestinians. When that's going to be realized, heaven knows. And in the case of Iran as well, no clear condemnation of a U.S.-Israeli aggression, instead criticizing Iran for defending itself. Do these governments really care about what their populations demand?
They pretend they care because, of course, they have to worry about elections. And even Trump are going to have a midterm election in November, hasn't he? So we shall see the consequence. Some of the American electorate may not particularly enjoy what is going on. So they have to pretend they care. But at the end of the day, there are some mechanisms behind all this theatrical show which guarantee that at the end of the day, the billionaires, the magnates, the moguls carry the day, because capitalism is really based on the notion of profit, the rich. And those who benefit from capitalism, ultimately the rich. The ordinary people do not. We are rediscovering, I don't know if I quote Karl Marx, but we're rediscovering perhaps some of the points in some of the socialist ideas of Karl Marx. But the question here, how can we fight back? How can we fight back? How can we oppose these oligarchs? And, you know, we can fight by words, we can fight by deeds, we can fight by prayer. Prayer, I think, works in ways which you don't know. And the sky's the limit. We cannot lie down. Just as the brave people of Iran are fighting back. You know, they're not with this ludicrous idea that we're going to rise up. No, they're fighting back. They're resisting the onslaught. They're resisting the Zionist octopus. They're resisting the lunacy of Donald Trump, the coward called Donald Trump. Just we have to fight back as well.
We certainly do. Are you expecting any guidance from the church, or have you received any guidance from the church on how to have solidarity with the people under attack? Or will the church be true to form and leave a lot to be desired, some would argue, during the Gaza genocide, as it did?
Well, I belong to the Church of England, the Anglican Church, the state church here. I'm afraid my church has, by and large, come to cowardice. It refuses to really follow Jesus Christ in this. They're terrified of this word anti-Semitism, which is pulled around all the time. I was in Cambridge last week attending a pro-Palestine event, a Center for Central Studies of Palestine, and the former Archbishop Rowan Williams, a fine theologian, but not a very good leader of a church, gave a speech going on a lot about anti-Semitism. I mean, anti-Semitism, here we go. Nominal Semites, like in Israel, though many of them are not really Semites, and murdering 70,000 fellow Semites, and going on to kill more. So what is this charge of anti-Semitism which scares some people? The Catholic Church is more serious, I have to say it. The Catholic Church is more serious because it's theology, it's a traditional authority. Unfortunately, the present Pope is an American. I think it was a great mistake to have made an American Pope. Usually the Catholic Church always avoided making a Pope who belonged to a nation which could exercise undue influence on the church. Although he's kind of a centrist, he's very measured in statement and not very optimistic. I don't think it's very likely the Catholic Church will declare this war unlawful, but of course one lives in hope.
One does live in hope, and perhaps the church can be reminded that there are hundreds of thousands of Christians living in Iran. That might change their mind in terms of taking a position on this. All right, we're going to have to leave it there. Father Frank Gelly, an Anglican priest joining us from London. Appreciate your time and your thoughts. Goodbye for now. All right, Chris Williamson, former British parliamentarian and the host of Palestine Declassified, right here on Press TV, sat down with us to talk about his continued opposition to any war on the Islamic Republic and the failed decapitation strategy, so-called, and the wider growing regional and global consequences of this aggression continuing. Have a look.
I don't think they've got an exit strategy. I mean, we saw, didn't we, in Iraq that they had no real plans, for the situation after they had toppled the administration there. And I think the same is true here. I mean, what they've done is to ignite chaos in the region and potentially catastrophic consequence for the world economy. And Iran is I mean, it's an unequal struggle, of course, because the United States has got massive weaponry and technology behind them. But Iran has got its own significant military capability, which they are demonstrating now. To the cost of American citizens, and this is. I mean, who knows where this is going to end now? I mean, it's such a catastrophic situation, and indeed, it was trailed by Iran. They said, "Look, if you launch this attack, the consequences will be devastating for the region, and potentially devastating for the entire world." And what we've seen is now, I mean, the Shia population around the world has been ignited in anger and fury, and they are demonstrating that, and not just in the local area, but we're seeing in Pakistan as well. And of course, world opinion, I think, ordinary people has been absolutely outraged as well. And so where this will end, I do not know. And I'm not optimistic, I've got to say. I think the consequences are going to be devastating for not just for the Iranian people. They are suffering the biggest consequence, of course, but also for others in the region. And indeed, people in this country as well, in the United Kingdom, I think, will face significant consequences in terms of the impact that it's going to have on the cost of living and the economy as a whole. Well, look, I mean, the Western world relies on fossil fuels, on gas and oil. And, Iran has already said it's going to close the Straits of Hormuz. I mean, that's already resulted in massive inflated cost now to transport oil around the world. I understand that the cost now of hiring an oil tanker has doubled in price overnight. So this is going to be significant, I think, and we saw, didn't we, when in Ukraine, and the impact that had on energy prices. I mean, that by comparison, that will be small, potentially be small beer, and so yeah, I think it's going to be very significant for people. It's trailed by Iran that the consequences would be devastating, and that US bases would be targeted, US personnel would be targeted. And I think it's interesting that attacks have been launched by Iran on targets which weren't overtly military targets, but we've subsequently discovered that military assets, military personnel were holed up in these alternative locations. So what that is indicating, it seems to me, is that Iran has a sophisticated intelligence network, and I think that will actually frighten the United States. That it's not going to be as a one-sided conflict as they perhaps at first thought. But look, it's also in the interests of the Zionist entity of Israel for the region to be in flames. And I mean, there's been some talk, hasn't there, about black ops by Israeli assets in the region as well, because their ultimate ambition is a greater Israel. The interview with Mike Huckabee that was undertaken by Tucker Carlson, where he said it in terms that, the greater Israel, I mean, they have a right to that, the land that was allegedly promised to them by God in the Bible, which runs from the river Euphrates to the river Jordan. I mean, this takes in like huge swathes of the region. Saudi Arabia, right the way in Egypt and other countries, Lebanon, and so on and so forth. So, yeah, I mean, it's a complete mess. Iran has been a significant bulwark against Israel's ambitions to create a greater Israel, and indeed that's why it's been the number one target for Israel. I mean, we've seen, haven't we, over the last 20 or 30 years that Iran was on the verge of creating a nuclear bomb, and there had to be precipitative action taken against them because they were in weeks of having these weapons of mass destruction. This is all in Israel. Look, this whole war is being prosecuted on behalf of Israel. I mean, it's to deliver the greater Israel project, and Donald Trump is completely in the pocket of Benjamin Netanyahu. Now, whether or not he's got compromise on Trump, bearing in mind that Trump came to power talking about being a peace president. I remember even speaking on the day he was being inaugurated at a rally outside the American embassy in London, welcoming his appointment, his inauguration, on the grounds that I naively expected him to be true to his word, that we would end the war in, or should I say, the genocide in Gaza, and he would end the war in Ukraine. He's failed on both counts. Not only has he failed, he's actually exacerbating the situation now. So, yeah, it's. I mean, I'm just flabbergasted by the whole situation.
Former MP and host of Palestine Declassified, Chris Williamson, speaking to us earlier. Now let's continue the conversation with Dr. Matthew Alford. He is a university lecturer and political analyst, joining us from Bath, UK. Matthew, good to have you with us. I'm going to ask you a very broad question, which is your thoughts on the status quo antebellum, the lead up to this war, the way the United States and Israel in the middle of nuclear talks with the Americans in launched this war of aggression on Iran and the Iranian response so far?
Yeah, so the big picture stuff. Yeah, I mean, it's great to be with you. Thanks for having me. It's a shame that we have to meet under these circumstances.
Matthew, we can't hear you, I'm afraid. Perhaps your mic is not on.
1 2 1 2.
We'll just wait for Matthew to.
1 2.
I think we're good. Can you say a few words, Matthew? I think we're good. Can you say a few words, Matthew?
How's that? Is that better? I'm using the computer mic.
That's better. You're on.
Okay. That's fine. So it's to speak to your viewers. The big picture is that, yes, of course, this is an absolute disaster. It's such a shame to have to meet under these circumstances every time we do. I think that what Chris Williamson has said is I completely agree with. He's a brilliant parliamentarian and humanitarian. You know, obviously our main thoughts are with the people of Iran at the moment. But there will be consequences that fan out way beyond that. And as Chris points to, you know, the prices are going to go through the roof in Britain. And this is going to cause major economic dislocation throughout the Western world. It's quite shocking that Donald Trump trying to draw down the genocide in Gaza, someone that seemed to be a peace president in Ukraine, but this is not been accurate. I mean, I don't know whether Chris is correct about Netanyahu having compromising material on Trump. I suspect that there's the more conventional explanation, which is just that Trump
is a reference to the Epstein files.
Yeah, but I would say that what's probably more likely is just what everyone has always said about Donald Trump, which is that he listens to the last person in the room, and he is so mercurial, he will follow that advice. And the problem is when you've got someone with a peculiar attention span like that, and he is surrounded only by Israel hawks and other kinds of hawks and interventionists, he is going to be very susceptible to it. I mean, he has turned from being someone who was a potential anti-war candidate 10 years ago, or even a few years ago, into someone who has fully embraced the role of genocidal tyrant, and that's it's a great shame because he did actually have a base that he could have carried with him to create a better world, even in the horrible circumstances in which his second term began.
I know you understand media very well. Compare and contrast, if you will, the prelude to the Iraq War, as I mentioned earlier, the status quo antebellum, the war propaganda around it, around the Trump ambassador to the UN, was it? Or where she claimed that Muammar Gaddafi was justify their invasion of these independent countries. A comparison of these wars and what is happening in the case of Iran now.
Yeah, there was Samantha Power and Condoleezza Rice who were both promoting various atrocity stories at one point or another in these different wars. One of the things I found most striking about the beginning of this war is that there is about a 25% approval rating for going in, for America to go in. Now, the Iraq War was considered to be a pretty unpopular war. And yet there was 75% support among the American public. That's 3 times more. That was a majority. Even in Britain, there was something like a 50% support rate for Britain being involved in the Iraq War in 2003. So the fact that they are doing this on such slim, with such slim public support is quite remarkable. Now, I think I would make a little distinction here, which is there has been a 47-year propaganda campaign against Iran. So I'm not saying that there is no propaganda and that there hasn't been any media astroturfing. It's obviously been a mass demonization campaign going on throughout my entire lifetime. However, the Trump administration has not laid the groundwork in propaganda terms at all effectively over recent weeks and months. And it seems partly, and maybe this is sort of reflected in that very weirdly bellicose, sort of bovine address that Pete Hegseth gave a few days ago, that they just don't care as much about how it looks or what the atrocity stories are and all that. They just want
Matthew,
to show
is it? Sorry to interrupt, but is it because, in your opinion, they're not? They're saying it might take a week or 2 weeks or 4 weeks, because they're going to tell their base, the MAGA base, that hey, we're not getting the United States involved in yet another forever war. Because remember that Donald Trump ran as an anti-establishment candidate, that there wouldn't be another war under his so-called leadership, that they wouldn't that the US wouldn't get mired in another stupid war, quote unquote, stuff that he said during his presidential campaign.
Yeah, I think you're right. It's part of it. It would probably antagonize the MAGA base if there was this 18-month lead up to a war. The school bully doesn't announce for a year that he's going to start bullying people or say why he shouldn't or shouldn't be doing it. He just does it and then treats it with contempt and then moves on. I mean, I think that's exactly what they did in Venezuela just a few weeks ago. They wanted to smash up the leadership, bully them, arrest the leader or kill the leader, and then pull out and move on. It's like the equivalent of flushing a kid's head down a toilet and then carrying on with your day. That's, I think, what the positionality is of the Trump administration. That's the image that they want to present. But I don't think it's possible with Iran. And I think ultimately as well, there will be, or the mechanisms of American democracy will slowly start to mechanize, start to kick in. And of course, the most obvious example of that will be in the midterm elections. There are a lot of people who are not going to be interested in propping up a loser genocidal tyrant, which is essentially what Trump's going to be. The only way he can really get out of it politically, and I'm sorry to focus on him because obviously this is really something about the people of the world and particularly the people of Iran. But I mean, the signs to look for are, does he say he's going to pull out? Does he pull out and just declare victory? Because that's probably the best thing that can possibly happen right now, is just that he says, oh yeah, I won, goodbye. And then hopefully it drops out of the headlines again. But I can't see that happening because there's no way that Iran is going to let that happen. Iran is going to continue to prosecute a defensive war.
Exactly, and that's what they said they would, that and they had warned of a global economic meltdown by stopping energy transfers from the region to the rest of the world. But I want to talk about the media ecosystem here in the UK, and we'll talk about the government's fence sitting on this as well. But starting with the media, I'm sure you, again, follow this stuff, and both the English language media and there's the Persian language media. I remember you telling me that you have Persian-speaking students or friends that probably help you with that. But as an example, you have the Persian service of the BBC. So, we pay £15 or so a license fee, but for Iranians in Iran, for everybody else, the BBC Persian productions are free to watch, and they are the most prolific of the non-English channels of the BBC. They produce the most content. The fact that there is so much focus, and I think I heard you mention that this has been going on for decades, by foreign funded media channels in Persian or otherwise, not only in the UK, but in the rest of the world, has been in action for so many years and pushed the situation into the space or into where it is now, a war of aggression by the United States and Israel on Iran.
Yeah, I didn't know that the Persian BBC was had the greatest output. That's really interesting. But of course, yeah, I mean, there's been massive interest from, there's historic interest, isn't there, from Britain and the BBC. So yeah, I mean, the mediated efforts here have been very important. I mean, I've looked quite carefully at the media over the past few weeks in particular, and it is interesting how they are. There's a lot of doubt about the actual operation, about the military operation by Donald Trump. There were very few publications, and I included looking at various foreign affairs focused publications like Foreign Affairs and Foreign Policy across the left and across the right. No one was really that keen to go ahead with this war. I found one article a couple of weeks ago in Foreign Affairs magazine that was advocating for, a greater Middle East that can come out of this. But generally speaking, the media, as well as public support, has been against. But as you alluded to just then, there is this kind of fence-sitting thing, which is basically there are a lot of horrible misanthropic assumptions about the war and about Iran. But the media, because they know that they need to appeal to the British or Western public, they are currently being a little bit circumspect with the way that they present them. I actually bought all of the newspapers this morning. You might just be interested to see what the headlines are. I'll show you a couple of them if you like.
Certainly.
So here's one, for instance. So this is the Daily Star with a picture of Keir Starmer dithering heights.
It's a play on Wuthering Heights. Yeah.
Yeah. So they're basically saying, this is a right-wing paper that's saying, he's just dithering around. He should be more committed to providing these Diego Garcia for America to use it. And there's this weird debate that's gone on in the last 2 or 3 days about whether Britain, which is kind of ridiculous, Britain says that it can be, operate defensively using these islands, blowing stuff up within a war of aggression. It's completely contradictory, but the media kind of got hold of that because they sort of want to see Britain as the good guys. But the right-wing press, of course, is showing that it is opposed to Starmer. And really, this is a way of kicking Starmer as well. It's a way of kicking the Labour Party. This is the Telegraph. Starmer must negotiate. US must negotiate with Iran. So says Starmer. PM calls for de-escalation talks with the regime, despite it bombing allies in the Middle East. So you can see the kind of tenor of what people are saying. This is the Express. We can't
no mention of the fact that Iran is the one that has come under attack here.
Exactly. Yeah, it's absolutely ridiculous. We can't stand by and expect others to help Britain. So at the moment, the press is not full mode because that it would be politically inexpedient, but they are using the opportunity to give the Labour Party a bit of a kicking, to sell newspapers and to foster up this kind of Orientalist nonsense that's been going on for centuries.
The United States has been desperately trying to sell this war. I mean, we heard comments from Donald Trump about the imminent threat, Iran threatening America or its assets. The Israeli claims of Iran only being days or weeks away from acquiring a nuclear weapon, despite the fact that Iran engaged in marathon negotiations with the Americans, the P5+1, over the decades. Are you surprised by the number of miscalculations you have witnessed on their strategy here?
The number of miscalculations by the United States?
The United States and, of course, Israel, but chiefly the United States.
Well, I mean, I think Israel has a strategy. I mean, it's a calculation. I don't know if you can call it a miscalculation because the Israeli government seem to have a strategy that they stick behind. The strategy is genocidal. I don't know if I'd call that a miscalculation or perhaps a malcalculation. It's just a bad calculation, and a horrible calculation. Have the Americans miscalculated? I think that Trump does not understand really that you can't just go in and, like I said, metaphorically flush the kid's head down the toilet like a school bully, and then there be no consequences. He thinks he can do that.
I guess he had the Venezuela example, and he thought maybe he could replicate that in the case of Iran.
Yeah, and of course, America's been doing this for decades, picking on small countries, which has always worked. At least if you accept the case of Vietnam. But in the past 50-odd years, since Donald Trump has been, alive and politically conscious, except for that one case of Vietnam, the United States has been able to pick on tiny neighbors, Panama and Iraq, small countries with populations of just 20-odd million in the case of Iraq, and just keep throwing them around. But this just can't happen with Iran, and I suspect that he just doesn't really get that. He thinks he can just go in and smash it up and then declare victory and fly off. It's just not going to happen.
I have this theory, but I would like to run it by you because first time I'm uttering this. I mean, we just discussed briefly Venezuela, and maybe he thought that Iran was just the same. And that he could go in, assassinate its head of state, and then people are going to take it to the streets. That's what he said, actually. He told Iranians in a televised address that wait 4 or 5 days, and we're going to tell you when to come out and overthrow your government. We're in day 7 now. But I was thinking that the reason he went into Venezuela was partly because to tell what he thought the groundswell of opposition against the Iranian government, supposedly, would tell them it is doable. They have the so-called monarchists on this side working in overdrive 24/7, Persian language TV channels, radio channels, other media, pumping propaganda into Iran to give them the impression that this is going to work, that's what's going to happen. Don't you think that was probably one of their calculations?
I wholly agree, because I think that when there are new presidential administrations, they're not thinking about each individual foreign policy issue, or indeed each individual domestic policy issue, as being isolated. Everything is connected. So the Americans want to be able to show, oh yeah, this is our posture. This is our nuclear weapons posture. This is our foreign policy posture. This is our attitude. And that, of course, ties in with its domestic strategy on the midterm elections and so on. And of course, there'll be a plan for succession. How does J.D. Vance fit into all of this? Is he who is going to be the next person who takes over from Trump in 3 years' time, et cetera, et cetera. So this is about presenting a posture. Now, if you go back in time, you may remember that President Nixon, and in fact, there was an Israeli strategist as well in the 60s, I think, but around about the same time, both were suggesting the madman strategy. Nixon was basically saying, I am going to look like a mad dog on the world stage so that Russia, China, and Vietnam all think that I'm insane enough to drop the bomb.
Nuclear bombs.
And this was also a strategy that was endorsed and discussed by Henry Kissinger. Now, those two people, Henry Kissinger and Richard Nixon, somehow seem like moderate diplomats by current standards. But it's the same thing that's being projected by Hegseth and Trump and Netanyahu. Well, I think Netanyahu's so unhinged, really, that he's kind of beyond strategy in a way. But certainly by the Trump administration. I think you're right. That they are.
Yeah, sorry to interrupt. I just wanted to say something about Hegseth.
Oh, please.
I'm sure you've seen the Arabic word kafar on Hegseth's right arm, and kafar meaning infidel.
Oh, God, it's just amazing.
This is a man who is the United States Secretary of War, self-described.
Yeah, he may as well have "I hate foreigners" tattooed on his forehead. But there is always a strategy more broadly for
Yeah.
for all these organizations. And of course, that what they did with Venezuela, I'm sure, is part of. I mean, that's what they saw. Even go back 30 years when they invaded Panama. I mean, in a way, that was softening up the world for interventions post Cold War, after the Soviet Union was due to fall. So yeah, these things aren't done in isolation. Yeah.
Correct. Again, another media-related question. I really like discussing this stuff with you. So CNN has been allowed to go into Iran and cover this ongoing aggression. And the correspondent was reporting from outside, well, standing just not outside, but close to a forecourt, a gas station. And he's saying everything looks normal, everything is functioning, people are filling up their tanks, everything else seems to be working. And then he gets Marco Rubio henchmen attacking him. People like Dylan Johnson, whoever that is. CNN appears to now be doing straight up pro-Iran regime propaganda because someone gave this guy a coffee. So, you know, Iranians, anyone who traveled through Iran has come across Iranian hospitality. People let you in their homes, offer you food, drinks for free. And then my question, I guess, is why would the United States or Marco Rubio henchmen not want an international journalist in Iran at this moment?
I mean, I guess the answer to that,
speaking in the manner this man did. Yeah.
I mean, I think anything that humanizes Iran is going to be is just not what they want as part of their playbook, do they? I mean, the BBC had their correspondent in Iran a couple of weeks ago as well, and there's just no hiding the fact that most countries are fairly normal, and to suddenly bomb them out of the blue is the abnormal thing. But anything it's a human connection. I can't give you a better answer than that. It's just the hatred that resides in people like Marco Rubio.
Let me ask you an even more serious question, which is when the Russian special military operation happened, people warned of World War III having started. Now you have Iran coming under attack by the United States and Israel. Iran is attacking U.S. assets in several Arab kingdoms and sheikhdoms in the region that host American bases. It's responding in retaliatory strikes, Israeli missile and other fire on Iranian targets, including civilian targets, schools, pharmaceutical companies, a sports stadium, and others. Are we in that eventuality now? Is this World War III, or are we yet to see this expand even further?
Well, as you might well know, in 2024, I called my whole channel the worst year ever. And this was because of the risks posed for World War III, inherent within the conflict in Ukraine and in the Middle East, specifically in Gaza. I mean, we could never entirely know exactly when that trigger is going to be pulled. It might well be that future historians, if there are any, will say that this war, this sort of Armageddon-like war, or what you might call World War III, didn't begin in February, March 2026, but actually began in October 2023. I suspect that would be a fair analysis of how future historians will see it. So are we at the point of a third world war? I mean, this has certainly been the conflict that I have considered to be the most dangerous at any point. But the main thing, I think, is I still wonder if in mainstream discourse, people don't quite understand really what World War III is, because they don't quite understand what the significance is of nuclear use. And this is the thing that's kind of always concerned me a bit, is that I think people like your Hegseths and your Rubios all kind of think that nuclear weapons can be used maybe just as a one-off, but none of the modeling to do with nuclear war has ever thought that that will be okay. We can't have one nuclear bomb go off. Now, we can have a series of conventional wars, a series of conventional low-level wars that still kill a lot of people and are still absolutely atrocious on the planet. But it's the transition, the unboxing of the nuclear weapon. As soon as that happens, we are in major problems, because there just is the logic amongst international society, which will lead to other countries using it. And that's just because that seems like old-fashioned thinking from the Cold War. It's still the same now. So that's the main thing.
Rubios and the Rubios and the Hegseths, will probably never ask the question why their country can have an arsenal of nuclear weapons, or they can have an ally in West Asia that has nuclear weapons but does not declare them or is not a signatory to the NPT, but a country that does not possess them has a fatwa, a religious edict, prevents it from having it, and is banned from having even a civilian nuclear program, and is bombed for the weapons it's never saw. We're going to leave it there for now.
Exactly.
Matthew Alford, University lecturer and political analyst, joining us from Bath, the UK. Appreciate it. Thanks for staying with us, everybody. Western citizens have started to arrive back to their home countries after several repatriation flights left the Persian Gulf region, and some of the first flights to arrive in the United States and Canada. Returning residents spoke of their experience and their disappointment that their respective governments have abandoned them to their own fates.
Mommy! The journey back here was, I think, smooth considering the circumstances. I mean, we were able to register on repatriation flights provided by Etihad. So I was first bounded on the flight to Munich, and then I was asked if I wanted to rebook to Washington, which I did because I'm a US citizen. And that flight was thankfully maintained. We had a little bit of a scare this morning at the airport. They had to evacuate due to safety threats. But all the flights were able to take off, which was great. Where I'm a little disappointed is how the U.S. government's been handling it. I mean, being in Abu Dhabi, I felt really safe and taken care of by the UAE government, but the embassy line to the U.S. embassy in Abu Dhabi actually had been cut off. You could not reach them, and they had recorded an automated message that I actually brought down because I was really shocked, saying if you're a U.S. citizen stranded in Abu Dhabi, we will not be providing evacuation or repatriation help. Please try to get on commercial flights. Thank you.
It was just lots of anxiety.
Yeah.
And
I mean, we were in hotels with missiles being intercepted above us and warnings going off. So, I mean, we knew stuff was going on, and it wasn't pleasant. We're pretty good world travelers, so we just sort of said, okay, we now have to do what we have to do.
We actually called the U.S. Department of State phone number that they've been promoting. Call us, we'll help you get out of there. They were absolutely useless. They said shelter in place. And we said, but you're telling us also to get out immediately. And they said, we have absolutely no evacuation plans from UAE right now.
What have you heard from the Canadian government? We have been in constant contact from day one, and they just said we don't have any evacuation plans. So if you can shelter in place, and then if you can make it out safely, go ahead. But they weren't one of the countries that was evacuating citizens.
And do you remember when they told you they don't have evacuation plans?
I mean, I had their emergency line, so I have emails and messages from them because I was in constant contact saying, like, are there any plans to evacuate? There were none at this time.
Okay, now let's bring in, from Belfast in the north of Ireland, Fra Hughes is a journalist, author, activist, and director of Palestine Aid Ireland. Fra, good to see you again. For starters, the fact that these countries didn't even have an evacuation plan in place, what does it say about their misunderstanding, their miscalculation of how this war of aggression would pan out?
Well, it's very interesting when you listen to those interviews. I mean, the first thing that struck me was this is like...
I can't hear you, I'm afraid. Perhaps your mic is not on. Can you say something so we can see if we can hear you?
1, 2.
That's it. You're on.
All right. Okay, thank you so much. Yes, it strikes me as very shambolic. I mean, you're listening to those interviews with those people who were forced to evacuate with their own money in their own time. And what struck me very much was the Americans leaving Saigon in Vietnam and the way they left Afghanistan, with people clinging onto the undercarriage of these planes. People fell hundreds, if not thousands, of feet to their death in the scramble to leave. So I think it might reinforce this whole idea that Donald Trump went into this illegal war on Iran with the idea that after the decapitation that there would be some form of revolt in the country and that this could be all done and dusted in 72 hours. And perhaps they didn't believe the Iranian government, which said that it would target all American bases within range in West Asia that were being used to attack the Iranian governmental offices. That includes police stations. They bombed schools, hospitals. They've attacked ambulances. They've attacked playgrounds, civilian buildings, and civilian infrastructure. So it looks like the Americans have gone in on the back of the push from Netanyahu and his war cabinet of genociders to try and inflict as much pain, death, and misery as possible, not on the Iranian government, but on Iranian civil infrastructure and Iranian civil society.
And I also think perhaps they didn't factor in the resilience of the axis of resistance that the assassinated leader of the Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, was an architect of. We're already seeing Hezbollah firing rockets on Israeli targets. You hear from the Ansarullah, known as the Houthis, also in Yemen, looking very uneasy, waiting to do something, meaning stopping ships from crossing the Red Sea. Do you think that's also perhaps one of their misunderstanding and miscalculations in this war of aggression?
I don't think so. I think if people like me in the West can sit and think, well, if they attack Iran, then Hezbollah and Ansarullah are going to come to the front lines. But we need to put things in perspective and in context and remind people from time to time that Hezbollah only exists as a reaction to the Zionist occupation and destruction of Lebanon. The Palestinian resistance only exists as a reaction to the occupation and destruction of Palestine. And the Ansarullah movement exists mainly because it came to birth as a reaction to foreign imperialist hegemonic interference within their nation. So the axis of resistance, in my view, is there to prevent the expansionist policies of this genocidal ethnic cleansing cabal in Tel Aviv. What they're trying to do is prevent this greater Israel. We've seen attacks upon Kuwait and upon the UAE and upon Saudi Arabia and upon Bahrain. But these are military attacks on American military facilities. People are talking about an asymmetric war. And when they talk about that, they're talking about the power of the American military. It's a world superpower. And then the smaller military capabilities of the Iranian government and by extension the axis of resistance. But when I see asymmetrical violence, what I see is the genocidal onslaught upon the people of Palestine. When they're bombing hospitals, when they're bombing civilian infrastructure, when they're bombing civilian homes, and they're murdering children in their hundreds. I think it was 168 children murdered on the first or second day of strikes on Iran by American missiles. Your man Pete Hegseth came out today and said basically there are no red lines, that previously America has been involved in wars that had moralistic boundaries. This is my interpretation of what he said. But the carpet bombing of Cambodia, the carpet bombing of Vietnam, and a carpet bombing of Iraq, and a carpet bombing of Libya, and also the carpet bombing of Gaza proves that they've never had any red lines. They are the terrorists. Terrorism is when you use violence upon a civilian population in order to obtain your political and military objectives. So the people using terrorism in West Asia is the Zionist entity and the North people, and are simply trying to protect the whole of West Asia from this greater Israel project, which will go from the Nile to the Euphrates. It will take in the Sinai in Egypt. It will take most, if not all, of Syria, all of Jordan, most of Iraq, all of Lebanon, and I think it's 1/3 of Saudi Arabia. So these Gulf countries that have allowed the Americans to set up these bases, they are actually in the firing line of the Zionists, to include Jordan and to include Lebanon and to include any coalition state that is acting in defense of the Zionist entity and acting in opposition to the axis of resistance, which to my mind is not just fighting the fascism of the Zionist regime, but the American continued unipolar hegemonic military actions around the world. It is fighting for humanity, it is fighting for the world, and it's fighting for you, and it's fighting for me.
Indeed, and importantly, before this round of terrorism in the form of this military strikes on Iran came economic terrorism. Many decades of sanctions against Iran, and more so in that so-called maximum pressure campaign that Trump introduced in his first and second tenures as president of the United States, to turn Iran into another Iraq in the 90s, just like they did, and then come in and deliver the coup de grace. But as we all have seen in the past week, the Iranian response has definitely taken them by surprise. Shifting locations now, you have been out in Egypt, I understand, nearby countries recently before all this madness. What was the feeling on the ground in potential conflict with Iran in terms of Israel's behavior and any potential conflict with Iran or anyone else?
First, I was actually on a global march to Gaza, which was in June 2025. Humanitarians from many different nations descended on Cairo with the hope that they would be able to travel to Rafah and stand near the border to show our solidarity with the Palestinians in Gaza, to call for an end to the genocide, and also as a byproduct to put some pressure on the Egyptian authorities. What they did was they started full square with the Palestinians in Gaza and indeed the West Bank and indeed historic Palestine. The government, when Sisi was put into power, you had Morsi, the democratically elected leader. I'm not a fan of the Muslim Brotherhood, but he was democratically elected. He was ousted in a coup. On about the fourth day of the coup, Sisi stood on the steps of the palace and said to the Americans, Why aren't you coming out and publicly supporting me? And then they said, subsequent to that, that they de facto recognized the change of power and position in Egypt and then back Sisi. Sisi is a puppet of the Zionists, and he's a puppet of the Americans, and he's a puppet of MI6 and Western intelligence. So the government in Egypt is complicit in the genocide in Gaza. Now, the people are very much in favour of ending all forms of war, misery, death and destruction in West Asia. I was also in Istanbul at a Palestinian conference in November, and I met people in Istanbul who were 100% behind the people of Palestine. I was in Tehran between December and the beginning of January 25, 26. I met the Iranians. I was there actually between the 28th and the 3rd, 20th of December and 3rd of January, whenever these terrorist-inspired, financed mercenaries took to the streets of Tehran and other cities and ran amok trying to destabilize the country. And then I was also in Egypt whenever recently the charity that I'm involved in helped raise £225,000 for 3 medical mobile clinics to be delivered to the Red Crescent. It's being wrought across the whole of West Asia. This by terrorism, it expands through terrorism. From 1948, we have had nothing but war, death and destruction in the heart of the Ummah, in the Levant, and all because these white Anglo-Saxon Europeans wanted to have a colonial settlement in historic Palestine, which is really about people who wanted power, people who wanted position, people who wanted to create a new nation, to steal the wealth and to steal the livelihoods and indeed steal the lives of the indigenous population, the Palestinians of Palestine.
In the case of the Israeli regime, you talked about the Greater Israel Plan. Others call it also Pax Judaica. We're looking at the Nakba, if you will, of Dahia, as per Professor David Miller, an anti-Zionist scholar, where so many hundreds of thousands of Shia Lebanese have been ordered to evacuate Dahia, their homes, on foot yesterday, carrying whatever they could. As Jewish supremacists, he goes on to say, plan to level the entire region of Beirut. I think the question I would like to ask you is the question of impunity. How the Israeli regime can commit such horrific crimes and get away with it.
Well, the UN has failed, but it was set up to fail. It was set up by the victors of the Second World War. The Security Council, with its veto, allows America and others to sanction, actually to sanction the UN, never mind sanction Iran or Venezuela or Cuba or Russia or China or anywhere else. I think the real fear that I have going forward is this lack of accountability empowers people to commit heinous acts of inhumane barbarity. Now, I've been involved, I went to Gaza in 2010 with George Galloway's Viva Palestina 5 medical aid convoy. For 16 years, I've been watching what's been happening in the Levant and across the globe. And I cannot help but feel not disillusioned, not disheartened, not saddened, but I genuinely cannot understand why, when Israel commits a genocide, when it bombs hospitals and schools, as we've talked about, when it murders ambulance drivers after luring them into ambushes, and then buries the evidence, and buries the bodies, and buries the ambulances, so long as these people continue to get away with this, then things can only get worse. Now, with the asymmetrical war that we talked about earlier, what we have is America and the Zionist entity murdering civilians at will across. They've done it in Syria, they've done it in Libya, they've done it in Iraq, they've done it in Afghanistan, they're now doing it in Iran, and they're continuing to do it in Gaza and in southern Lebanon. The resistance has a moral code. It has a religious ethic. It fights by the doctrines of the laws of war. They don't attack civilians. They don't attack civilian infrastructure. They try to limit their attacks to military facilities, military personnel, and the government that is in charge of the policies that those military people are carrying out. So Israeli citizens, I'm not encouraging violence. I'm against war. I'm against destruction and death. Israeli society does not pay a price for what its sons and daughters, brothers and sisters, and mothers and fathers are doing in southern Lebanon, now in Iran, what they have done in Gaza, what they are continuing to do in Lebanon and in southern Syria. They are hiding in their bunkers, celebrating the death of Iranians and Palestinians. And they are not only held to account in the legal sense before The Hague and before war criminal tribunals, but the ordinary civilian in Israel doesn't pay a price for the murder and destruction that they're carrying out across the Levant. And I believe until there is a reckoning and until they face the same type of violence that they are offering to the rest of the region, then their wanton destruction of human life will continue unabated, because they're not held to account in the global judicial system. They're not held to account by world governments, and their society is not held to account, held to the same level of, it's not held to the same level of other countries. And indeed, there is a percentage of Israeli society and governmental policy that has the rest of us are inhuman. So this white Anglo-Saxon racist fascist regime, this rogue regime that is in Tel Aviv, who claim everyone else is the terrorist, everyone else is killing civilians, everyone else is a global or regional threat. Every accusation is a confession. They are the people destroying the Levant, destroying West Asia, and bringing us all to the brink of disaster. And until they treat us as human beings, and their racist mentality, which is against brown people and black people, just like Anglo-Saxon America and Anglo-Saxon Europe, until they're held to account, they'll just continue to dehumanize people to the point where they can murder us at will in any way they want. And we have pedophiles in charge of Europe and North American internal and external policies. And while these people remain in place, nothing will change.
Pedophiles and fugitives of international justice. You mentioned Iranian mercenaries. That, of course, what you witnessed in your recent trip to Iran. People who were turned what was a legitimate protest against economic issues into riots that threaten Iran's national security. There are mercenaries there, but there are those outside of Iran telling them what to do, taking to the airwaves in the States, in Britain, elsewhere, maligning the Islamic Republic 24/7. In terms of, again, war propaganda, a lot of people believe, and I think rightly so, that the Iran war propaganda has gone full Gaza. And one example of that is the death tolls. So when the riots happened, you would hear comments like tens of thousands of Iranians, that the government killed tens of thousands of their own people. One of the wildest ones that I heard was that there are silos of bodies of people who were killed in those riots. Now that there is a war, and these are people who have been cheerleading the United States and US and Israeli aggression against Iran, in numbers, you would hear some of their talking heads on Western TV channels. The bombing of schools is justified because, quote, the regime says. easily brushing aside a statistic that comes from, for example, Iran's Red Crescent Society. And then supporting one candidate, all of them coalescing at the moment around one candidate, and that is the former Shah of Iran's son, the self-described crown prince. That seems to be thinking that he has the majority support inside and out of outside of Iran. The U.S. president, of course, and other officials in the American administration or among American politics asked many times if they supported him. His name does come up in conversations with, as recently as today, the American president, as mercurial as he can be, said on none other than CNN that it's going to work like it did in Venezuela. We have a wonderful leader there. She is doing a fantastic job, and it's going to work like that. I don't mind religious leaders. I work with a lot of religious leaders, and they are fantastic. But I think these people who are quote unquote leader of Iran will soon have egg on their faces. They will be sorely disappointed, so it seems, especially because of the kind of rhetoric we're hearing coming out of Washington, and the ire and the hatred of the anti-war movement that they have drawn for embedding themselves with the Zionist entity that is accused of genocide at the International Court of Justice.
Yes, well, I don't think the son of the Shah will ever see a day in Tehran. I say that simply because the whole rationale behind the Islamic Revolution in 1979 were the atrocious acts that were carried out by the Shah. You had this man installed after the coup against the democratically elected leader in 1953, Mossadegh. They put the Shah in a CIA MI6 operation because Mossadegh, being a socialist, he wanted to nationalize the oil industry because Western companies like Dutch Oil and British Petroleum were taking the Iranian people out of Iran and into the corporate pockets of the shareholders and of the oligarchs in Britain and in Holland. He was having lavish parties while people were starving. He created the conditions where the Islamic Revolution came to the fore. There's no way his son is ever going to be allowed to take over because people fought in that revolution. Ayatollah Ali Khamenei fought in that revolution. These people who have led Iran against the sanctions and as a bulwark against Zionism, the core, and it's not the IRGC, there are 90 million people or something in Iran. And we've seen millions of people on the streets. We see them today because today is the day of prayer. It is Friday. There are millions, if not tens of millions of people on the streets across Iran supporting their government. And we talk about the Shia religion, we talk about Imam Hussein, we talk about Imam Ali. I've been to Karbala, I've visited the mosques. I know how deeply the sense of indignity against injustice and the want to stand by the oppressed people. Iran stands with Palestine because it's a moral issue. They stand with Palestine because they don't will not stand idly by while innocent people are murdered by this colonial occupation. So the Shia religion, I am not religious, but when I meet people with the Shia religion, I have a conversation with them. I find that my politics, which I see as socialist, I see that the good of the many should outweigh the greed of the few. I see this represented in Shia Islam. My anti-imperialist politics, my anti-colonial politics, my anti-capitalist politics are a complete mirror of the Shia religious code of ethics. So I stand by the democratically elected government. I stand by the people of Iran. I stand by a government that spends the wealth of the nation on the needs of the people of the nation. And when you look at the West, you look at North America and Europe, you'll see exactly the opposite. You'll see these people on their same things. You'll see them filling their pockets with money.
You mentioned Ayatollah Khamenei. There's a clip of him on the front lines. He went to the front lines after having sought, when he was president, after having sought permission from his predecessor, Imam Khomeini, just to boost morale. And can't think of any Western leader to have been seen. Fra Hughes, journalist, author, activist, and director of Palestine Aid Ireland. Many thanks for joining us and sharing your thoughts with us here on Press TV. And thank you for accompanying us for the past 2 hours. We brought you the views from across the UK, from Scotland, from the north of Ireland, here in London, as well as in Bath. Thank you very much. Stay tuned to Press TV. More is coming your way right after this.
Hello and welcome everyone. You're watching Press TV World News from the Islamic Republic of Iran. Let's go ahead and get started with this hour's top headlines. Well, Iran's armed forces have launched a new wave of attacks against key Israeli military infrastructure as part of the Operation True Promise number 4. The missiles, accompanied by attack drones, successfully passed through multiple layers of air defenses. The strikes targeted sensitive buildings and military installations in the cities of Haifa, Tel Aviv, and Al-Quds. The IRGC says it used a powerful Khorram Shahed 4 ballistic missile in its latest attack. It says the armed forces also used the Hadid 110 suicide drone in operational strikes for the first time. The aircraft flies faster than the Shahid series, potentially complicating air defense efforts by Israel and the U.S. U.S. bases in regional countries were also targeted. The IRGC Navy struck an American oil tanker in the northern parts of the Persian Gulf with a missile. So far, the U.S. has confirmed the killing of 6 of its soldiers in Iran attacks. However, Iranian officials say the actual figure is much higher. Meanwhile, the U.S. and Israel continue to target civilian infrastructure in Iran. Their latest targets include a stadium in the Iranian capital and 2 schools in the town of Parand, southwest of Tehran. Iran's health ministry says 14 hospitals, 7 emergency centers, 9 ambulances, and 4 other medical facilities have been damaged by U.S.-Israeli attacks. Iran's death toll now stands at 1,332 Iranians killed. Well, rescue workers in Tehran say U.S.-Israeli airstrikes have hit residential neighborhoods in the Iranian capital, leaving civilians dead and injured as emergency teams race to pull survivors from the rubble.
This is Nilufar Street in Tehran, a non-residential area that has been struck by American-Israeli missiles. Rescue workers are searching the area and assisting the injured. We hope that not many people have been harmed, and that the wounded will be rescued from beneath the rubble.
Unfortunately, most of the residential buildings in this area have been destroyed, like this building, which has been completely demolished. Given that most of the cars belonging to this building remain buried under the rubble, it indicates that many people did not even have enough time to leave the building. Ma'am, could you tell us exactly what happened here?
Last night, they bombed the Vanak neighborhood and Gandhi Street 3 times. At 8 p.m., when the first missile hit this very alley, the electricity in the houses went out. Thank God we managed to get out of the house. Then, when the next 2 missiles struck here, we heard the loud sound of a building collapsing. It seemed as if an entire building had come down. We went to the basement. When we came back outside, we saw people lying on the ground, covered in blood.
Well, Iran's Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi warns that the Iranian armed forces are prepared for any kind of scenario and clarifies that the only target of Iran's attacks in Persian Gulf countries are the military assets.
Well, we were ready for this war even more than the previous war. So you can see, the quality of our missiles, how much they are upgraded after the last war, because we learned lots of lessons. And we are prepared for any other eventuality, even, a ground invasion. So our soldiers are prepared for any scenario. When I said we are waiting for them, it didn't mean that we are waiting for continuation of the war. No, but we have prepared ourselves to confront with any scenario, with any eventuality, any possibility, and we know that we can handle that. We have not attacked our neighbors. We have not attacked Muslim countries. We have attacked Americans' targets and Americans' bases, Americans' installations, which are unfortunately located in the soils of our neighbors. So we have made it clear for them. I have been in touch with their foreign ministers, and I have explained that we are not targeting you. We have no problem with you. We are only targeting the American installations.
Ismail Baghai says American citizens deserve to be aware of the lies the U.S. government is telling when it comes to actions against the innocent people of Iran.
You remember, in June, they said that they obliterated Iranian nuclear program, period. And still they are talking about 1 week away from Iran's producing weapons-grade nuclear material. That's a big lie. And I think the American people deserve to know, to understand what their government is doing against the innocent people in Iran. They are waging a war against one of the most enduring civilization across the globe. And please, again, bear in mind that they are targeting every symbol and signs of our rich culture and heritage. Yesterday, they attacked Gulistan Palace in the center of Tehran. And that was one of the monumental heritage of Iranian civilization. So what they are doing, they're not just killing our officials, our elites, they are also killing innocent girls, nurses, and targeting the municipalities in order to deprive people of everyday basic services.
Well, in other news, the Embassy of the Islamic Republic of Iran in Paris opened a condolences register for the leader of the Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, following the U.S.-Israeli aggression against Iran. Throughout the day, supporters, members of the Iranian diaspora, and friends of Iran came to pay tribute, write messages, and express solidarity with the Iranian people.
Today in Paris, the Embassy of the Islamic Republic of Iran opened a book of condolences following the martyrdom of the leader of the Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, after the American-Israeli aggression against Iran. Throughout the day, visitors came to the embassy to pay their respects and express solidarity with the Iranian people. Inside the embassy, people quietly approached the condolence register to leave messages and reflect in silence. For many present, it was a moment of mourning and unity with a nation under attack.
Today we opened a book of condolences here so that people who love Iran, who love Islam, and who love our leader of the Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, can come and show their sympathy and their friendship and reaffirm their attachment to an independent Iran and to our people.
As the day continued, more visitors arrived to pay tribute. Some expressed anger at the bombings and concern for the victims of the attack.
Today the enemy comes with planes, bombs and
I wanted to be present today to share in the mourning of the Iranians, who have lost Imam Sayyid Ali Khamenei, and of course, many other Iranian leaders and ordinary people who are dying for their homeland and for ideals that are essential to the survival of humanity.
Throughout the evening, visitors continued to sign the register and leave messages of support for Iran. This gathering in Paris reflects the grief and solidarity of those who came to pay tribute to the leader of the Islamic Revolution. Qasim Hassan for Press TV in Paris.
Well, thousands of supporters gathered in Baghdad at the Liberation Square to commemorate the martyrdom of the leader of the Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei, expressing solidarity with the Iranian people and condemning the aggression by the United States and the Israeli regime, while vowing that the blood of the martyrs will lead to eventual victory. Nawad Fayyaq reports.
A condolence gathering and the protests were held in Tahrir Square in Baghdad, where crowds condemned the American and Israeli aggression against the Islamic Republic of Iran and received mourners for the martyrdom of the leader of the Islamic Revolution in Iran, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei.
The Cultural Coordination Authority and the Central Popular Committee in Iraq held a memorial gathering in Najaf to commemorate the martyrdom of the leader, Sayyid Ali Khamenei, along with the martyrs who fell in Iraq and Lebanon. This spontaneous mass vigil is expected to grow into a anniversary of the martyrdom of Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib.
It is deeply painful for us to offer condolences for the loss of our leader, our guide, and our imam. In this gathering, I would like to emphasize that this vigil in Baghdad marks the beginning of the central gathering and the main rally supporting the stance against the criminal policies of the Zionist entity and the United States behind it. This gathering also comes in solidarity and in response to the call of the religious authority, which urged support for the oppressed Iranian people in what it described as their just war against the Zionist entity and the United States, referred to as the Great Satan. Accordingly, we announced today that this gathering will continue until the aggression against the Islamic Republic comes to an end. This location will also host a symbolic funeral procession, coinciding with the funeral ceremonies taking place in the Islamic Republic of Iran.
From the very first day, the condolence gathering will continue until the 40th day of Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei martyrdom, in appreciation of Imam's martyrdom during the American-Israeli regime aggression.
Today we stand in this honorable gathering, and across Iraq there are demonstrations and massive crowds that seek to affirm that we stand with the Islamic masses. As we have emphasized, we are in one battle and in one trench. We stand together to say to all the tyrants of the world that they will never break our determination. We are on a path toward victory, and victory will be achieved. Our steadfastness itself is a victory in the face of enemies. Standing against the tyrants of the world and their vast military capabilities, this resilience and these great achievements prove that we are victorious, and this is the true victory.
These blood sacrifices will bear victory, because the blood of martyrs has always led to victory. In this gathering, we seek to express solidarity with the oppressed Iranian people, as described by the religious authority. We have always said that we stand with the oppressed and stand against the oppressor. Continuing these demonstrations and supporting them aims to keep the voice of truth raised high. We say that this people are under siege while defending the honor of Islam as a whole. Therefore, we pray to God Almighty to grant the martyr his vast mercy and to make us among those who continue walking on the path of truth.
The Iraqi people continue to provide support to Iran and its people against the brutal aggression.
A large public gathering was held here in Baghdad in Liberation Square following the martyrdom of the leader of the Islamic Revolution in Iran, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei. The participants condemned the US and Israeli regime aggression against the Islamic Republic of Iran. Press TV, Nawar Fayek, Baghdad.
Well, in the United States, both houses of Congress have shot down a War Powers Resolution Act, which would have forced President Donald Trump to get their approval to continue his war on the Iranian people. There is increasing admission by the U.S. elites that the country is poorly prepared for the
Kingdom of God.
5 days into Iran's unprecedented retaliation for the latest attack by Washington and Tel Aviv, the United States is starting to grapple with their inadequate planning, lack of military preparedness, and admissions by people as high as the Secretary of State that they launched this war for the benefit of Israel.
It was one of the senators, and I'm trying to remember which one it was, and I'm sorry I can't remember his name. He said, Israel has been waiting for a president this stupid to do their work, and they finally found him. And that's what I think is going on. We are being Israel's lapdog.
There is increasing realization in the mainstream media that the United States has not and will not quickly produce enough defensive missiles to defend against Iranian projectiles, which are both cheaper and larger in number. Washington's Persian Gulf allies are already running low of the expensive counter missiles which have failed to protect U.S. military bases in their country, vital billion-dollar radar detection systems, and more. The former U.S. ambassador to Yemen reportedly said, quote, "What we've seen is a completely ad hoc or improvised operation, where it appeared that nobody actually understood or believed that military action was imminent. It seems like they woke up on Saturday morning and decided that they were going to start a war," end quote. Many believe the quickest way to peace is for the U.S. to admit that they will lose this war of missile attrition, which makes the bombing of Iranian civilians
showed that His Eminence Ayatollah Imam Khamenei was not only the leader of the Islamic Republic of Iran, but a great leader for the Islamic countries and for millions of Muslims who followed the path of Imam Khamenei.
Prayers and religious ceremonies to remember Sayyid Ali Khamenei were also held throughout Austria over the past days in mosques and cultural centers.
These are sad circumstances, and our thoughts and prayers are with our brothers and sisters who are going through difficult times. We must stand firm for them and raise awareness of what is happening. Sayyid Ali Khamenei and other great scholars have always reminded us to remain on the path of the Quran and to strive for it.
The day before, the embassy held a press briefing informing
the positions and the many officials in Europe and also in Austria regarding this aggression. It is obvious that these aggressions have been in clear contradiction with international law.
Meanwhile, the International Atomic Energy Agency held its quarterly Board of Governors meeting in the city. Yet again, as during the 12th day aggression in June, Director General Grossi and the board refused to condemn the US-Israeli aggression. Instead, Russia read a joint letter signed by several states, including China, Belarus and Cuba, to express their solidarity with Iran and condemn the attacks.
The main responsibility of the IAEA is to react to the threat to the nuclear facilities. He should condemn the attack on nuclear facilities. He didn't condemn, unfortunately, in June. And right now, we are not witnessing a good reaction and responsibility by the agency.
The large number of ambassadors paying tribute to Ayatollah Ali Khamenei is testimony for the huge respect he enjoyed around the world. As the Pakistani ambassador to Austria said to me, he was like a father figure for all Muslims and the whole Pakistani nation. The book of condolences will be open to the public and dignitaries until Friday night. Dieter Reinisch for Press TV from Vienna.
Well, the Israeli regime has launched a fresh wave of attacks across Lebanon, killing more civilians in a blatant violation of its ceasefire deal with Beirut. Israeli airstrikes targeted towns in Kfar Ruman, Haboush, Srifa, and Nabatiya al-Fawa in southern Lebanon. Another 2 strikes hit the outskirts of the town of Toul in the south. The Israeli military said it carried out 26 waves of attacks in southern Lebanon and southern suburbs of Beirut since 2023, with 683 others injured. Attacks with rocket barrages and artillery shells on Israeli positions inside Lebanese territory. The Lebanese resistance group also targeted the occupying regime's positions and barracks in the south. The Israeli naval base in the occupied city of Haifa was also hit with a rocket barrage. Well, viewers, with that, it brings us to the end of this hour's headlines. Let's go straight into, of course, our ongoing rolling coverage, day 7 of the U.S.-Israeli aggression on Iran, and, of course, the Islamic Republic of Iran's retaliation as promised, a true promise number 4 operation. So far, 22 waves. Before we get updated on the latest, let's go ahead and bring in from Dhaka, Mr. Greg Simmons. Mr. Simmons, as always, a pleasure to have you with us during this ongoing rolling coverage. Let's go ahead and start off with what the latest situation is, which is, of course, Trump's statement to CNN, of course, the White House. He's saying that he has already found a way to deal with the Strait of Hormuz issue. According to him and according to the White House, he's going to be having